What if the worst moment of your life was also the beginning of your greatest love story? Ethan is a 36-year-old ER doctor. He wasn't one of those kids who dreamed of being a doctor, but somewhere in the cold, sterile hallways of Chicago Memorial, he found his purpose. Dr. Ethan's life is a blur of exhaustion, running on fumes, and the ghost of a good night's sleep. It's not uncommon to see him striding down the corridors at impossible hours, trading the comfort of his home for the relentless demands of the emergency room, for the patients who trust him with their lives. That specific morning, before everything changed, his alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. as usual. He slapped it silent with a tired sigh. Another 24-hour shift loomed ahead. He dragged himself out of bed, the weight of his chronic exhaustion settling on his shoulders. In the bathroom, he stared at his reflection while brushing his teeth. His eyes were sunken, framed by the dark circles that had become a permanent feature over the last few years. When he was a resident, his mom used to joke that he looked like a panda. She didn't joke about that anymore. The hot shower shocked his body awake, but his mind was already at the hospital, running through the cases from his last shift. The gentleman with heart failure, the young girl with a suspected appendicitis, and so many other faces that blurred together in his memory. He dressed quickly, grabbing the ironed white coat he always left ready the night before, and left without breakfast. He never had an appetite this early. The rich smell of coffee from his neighbor's apartment filled the hallway, but he just closed the door and headed for the elevator, his stomach churning with the usual pre-shift anxiety. The commute to the hospital was always the same, a 25-minute drive through the city's still sleepy streets. Ethan used this time to listen to music. It was his way of bracing himself for the day. That morning, an indie rock playlist was playing softly as he drove on autopilot, knowing every curve, every stoplight, every pothole on the route. Chicago was slowly waking up, the first rays of sun painting the sky over Lake Michigan in shades of orange and pink, a beauty he barely noticed, his focus already on the challenges waiting for him. Ethan's days are a whirlwind of medical emergencies and constant interactions with colleagues and nurses. Despite the bone-deep weariness, a light still shines in his eyes when he helps someone, whether it's easing their pain or saving a life. That feeling of making a difference is the fuel that keeps his passion for medicine alive. But that day would be different. While working in the ER, Ethan had no idea that in a few hours, his life would be completely and irrevocably changed. Between patients, he grabbed a quick coffee in the break room. His colleague, Dr. Henry, was chatting about the Bulls game from the night before, but Ethan was barely listening. His mind was wrestling with a complicated diagnosis he needed to solve before his shift ended. A young man with diffused abdominal pain that didn't fit any textbook case. Uncertainty was the ghost that always haunted him. In the afternoon, he treated an elderly woman crying out in pain, a fractured femur. Ethan held her hand as he explained the procedure she needed, saw the fear in her eyes, and felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the one that always hit when he witnessed suffering. Her skin was thin and wrinkled, almost transparent, and the fragility of her touch reminded him of his own grandmother. This is it, he thought. This is why I do what I do. Not for the recognition, not for the salary that barely covered his student loans, but for the chance to be there, to be the line between despair and hope. Ethan lives alone in a small but cozy apartment in Lincoln Park. His rare moments of rest are seldom peaceful, as he often spends them reviewing diagnoses, studying new medical journals, or just replaying the toughest cases in his head. He doesn't complain. He seems to accept that the weight of his profession is now part of who he is. His apartment was in an old brownstone, a simple one-bedroom with furniture inherited from his grandmother. The living room bookshelf was crammed with medical textbooks, many still holding bookmarks on important pages. The scent of old paper mingled with the faint aroma of reheated coffee. The kitchen was rarely used. Ethan practically lived on hospital food and takeout. His bedroom was his sanctuary, with a comfortable bed that seemed to embrace him after his grueling shifts. On the walls were a few family photos and a medical degree he glanced at with pride every time he passed. His relationship with his parents is one of deep respect and admiration. Whenever he can, he visits them and shares stories from the hospital, especially with his father, who also dedicated his life to medicine as a pediatrician. Perhaps watching his father in action planted the seed in his heart, something he never planned, but which grew naturally. His dad, Dr. Anthony, had run a practice on the Gold Coast for over 30 years. Ethan grew up watching that man leave the house before sunrise and return long after dark. He saw the dedication, the exhaustion, but also the profound satisfaction in his father's eyes when he saved a child. He vividly remembered one specific day from his childhood. He must have been about 10, when his dad came home emotional. He had saved a premature baby that no one thought would survive. His father cried that day, and Ethan understood that medicine wasn't just science. It was love for human life. Among his colleagues, Ethan is known for his calm and patience, traits that stand out even in the most high-pressure situations. He's the kind of doctor who truly listens, who understands not just the physical symptoms, but also the fears and anxieties that come with them. This sensitivity has earned him the respect of both his patients and his medical team. The head nurse, Clara, always said that working with Ethan was different. He never yelled, never lost his cool, even in the most critical moments. He had a way of calming people with just a look. Patients trusted him instinctively. There was something in Ethan's steady voice, in the way he held a trembling hand, that conveyed safety even when the situation was dire. Still behind the white coat, Ethan is a man with his own dreams, insecurities, and a constant search for balance. The hospital is almost an extension of his home, but he also has moments where he longs to disconnect and enjoy simple pleasures, dinner with friends, a walk along the city's lakefront, or even just a few quiet hours with a book. These rare moments are precious, refueling him for the mission ahead. On his infrequent weekends off, Ethan loved to walk the lakefront trail. He'd watch the people, the runners, the families with children. Sometimes he'd stop at a cafe for an iced coffee and just exist without the pressure of the hospital. In those moments, he'd wonder what it would be like to have a more normal life, to wake up late, to travel without worrying about shifts, maybe even to have someone special by his side. But medicine always called him back, an irresistible summons. Ethan isn't just a doctor. He's a human being with a unique story, marked by his choices and the impact he wants to have on the world. His routine may be grueling, but it's also an expression of his courage and determination. He knows that every day brings new challenges, but also new opportunities to care, to inspire, and to learn. It is this complexity that makes him so captivating and central to his story. On that fateful night, after a 24-hour shift that had been particularly challenging, Ethan finally left the hospital. It was almost 7 p.m. and exhaustion was a physical weight on his body. He got into his car, adjusted the seat, and took a deep breath. Another day survived. He turned on the music, letting it fill the space, trying to empty his mind of the day's images. It had been a rough one, with 3 cardiac arrests and a child who didn't make it. Those were the nights that hurt the most, the nights when the feeling of failure consumed him, even knowing he had done everything possible. Immersed in his music, Ethan drove carefully, despite the quiet night. Sheridan Road was strangely empty, with only a few cars scattered along the dark, winding pavement. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a beautiful contrast against the starry sky. He hummed quietly, his fingers tapping the rhythm on the steering wheel. He was thinking about getting home, taking a hot shower, and sleeping for 12 straight hours. Maybe he'd order a pizza, a small luxury to make up for the terrible day. When a woman suddenly appeared in the road, everything happened in a split second. Ethan saw a running silhouette, a face pale with panic, her hair flying wildly. He tried to brake, yanked the wheel hard, but it was too late. The impact was unavoidable. The sound of the collision shattered the night's silence, a dry, terrible noise that echoed in Ethan's chest. The car skidded, followed by the shriek of tires leaving dark marks on the asphalt. The smell of burnt rubber filled the air. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs so loud he could hear it in his own ears. For a second he was frozen, hands gripping the wheel, eyes wide. No, he thought, this can't be happening. He scrambled out of the car, his legs shaking so badly he could barely stand. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he brought one to his head in a gesture of pure despair. The air suddenly felt heavy, hard to breathe. On the ground, Chloe was unconscious, blood trickling from her temple, forming a small, dark pool on the asphalt. It was a scene Ethan would never forget. She was dressed in workout clothes, her body motionless, her face turned to the side. Ethan felt his knees go weak. As a doctor, he'd seen blood 1,000 times, but this was different. This blood was here because of him. "Don't touch her! Stay back!" he yelled, his voice thick with anguish as he saw a few onlookers approaching. 2 cars had pulled over. An elderly woman was already on her phone. Ethan knelt beside Chloe, quickly assessing her vital signs. She was breathing, her pulse was weak but steady, a clear head trauma. He needed to stay calm, to be the doctor he was trained to be, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The metallic smell of blood mixed with the damp asphalt made his stomach turn. As a doctor, he knew exactly what to do, but the shock of the moment seemed to paralyze him. She can't die, he thought. Please, God, don't let her die. Ethan checked her breathing again, keeping her head immobilized, knowing that any wrong move could worsen a potential spinal injury. The seconds felt like hours. After someone in the crowd called 911, the minutes dragged on. Ethan never took his eyes off Chloe, watching her every slight movement, every breath. He prayed quietly, something he hadn't done in years. Guilt was already eating him alive, a terrible feeling of helplessness mixed with desperation. He was a doctor, he saved lives every day, and now he had put one at risk. The wait for the ambulance was agonizing. A man offered him water, but Ethan didn't even hear him. He was completely focused on the unknown woman on the ground. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, beautiful, with delicate features. What was she doing running into the road at this time of night? As he tried to stay calm and ensure no one interfered, Ethan noticed she was starting to regain consciousness. Her eyes fluttered beneath her eyelids. Finally, after an eternity that was probably 15 minutes, the paramedics arrived. The red and blue lights bathed the scene, the siren cutting through the night. 2 EMTs rushed out with a stretcher and equipment. Ethan identified himself as a doctor, quickly relaying her condition. Victim of a car-pedestrian accident, head trauma, vitals are stable. She was briefly regaining consciousness a few minutes ago. With the paramedics' help, Chloe was stabilized. They fitted her with a C-collar, immobilized her on a backboard, and checked her vitals. During the process, she opened her eyes briefly, murmuring something incomprehensible. One of the paramedics asked for her name. Chloe, she managed to say, her voice faint. Chloe Miller. She asked them to call her mom, managing to recite the number even in her dazed state. Ethan watched every move, still trembling. She was loaded into the ambulance, destined for the nearest public trauma center. Ethan watched in silence as the flashing lights and the siren faded into the darkness. The onlookers began to disperse. A police officer who had arrived asked for his license and registration, asking a few questions about the accident. Ethan answered mechanically, his mind still seared with the image of Chloe lying on the asphalt. When he was finally alone again, Ethan leaned against the hood of his car and let the tears fall. He cried out of fear, guilt, and the overwhelming relief that she was alive. His hands were still shaking. How would he drive home? How would he ever sleep again, knowing he had hit someone? Even if it was an accident, even if she had run out of nowhere, the guilt was there, heavy as a stone in his chest. The next day, Ethan couldn't stay home. He had a shift, but that wasn't it. The responsibility, the weight of it all drove him to act. He arrived at the hospital at 6 a.m., his eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. He couldn't close his eyes all night, replaying every second of the accident. With his phone in hand, he dialed the number of a trusted friend, a man he considered a brother. They had known each other since childhood. Ryan had lived 3 doors down from Ethan. They played street hockey, went to the same schools, and graduated from med school in the same year. Ryan was more extroverted, more laid back, but their friendship was rock solid. They were brothers in every way that mattered. Dr. Ryan worked at County General, the public hospital where Chloe would have been taken. Ethan took a deep breath before making the call, his fingers trembling as he dialed. Ryan, I need your help. It's an emergency. Ethan's voice was choked. I accidentally hit a woman with my car. She was conscious and gave her name and her mom's contact info. She was stabilized and is being taken to your hospital. But she has private insurance, and the ambulance will likely transfer her to her in-network hospital after initial treatment. I'm on shift, and I need you to keep me updated. On the other end of the line, Ryan was silent for a second, processing. Oh my God, Ethan, are you okay? The genuine concern in his friend's voice was immediate. I get it, man. Stay calm, Ryan said, trying to be a steadying force. I'm mobilizing the team right now to make sure she gets everything she needs until the transfer. What's her name? Chloe Miller, 28 years old. Ethan had memorized every detail. I'm on it. Keep your phone on, and I'll update you with any changes, Ryan promised before hanging up to prep his team. At County General, the ER was a flurry of motion. Prep Trauma Bay too. Get Dr. Ryan in here now. The charge nurse yelled as the gurney carrying Chloe was wheeled through the doors. Get her on the monitors and let's get labs and imaging. We need to stabilize her fast. Ryan ran in, still tying his mask. He examined Chloe quickly, ordering a CT scan, x-rays, everything necessary. She was awake now, confused and pain. She kept asking what happened, where she was. Ryan explained calmly, his mind also on Ethan. He knew his friend well enough to know he was tearing himself apart with guilt. Bro, Chloe was transferred out of here around 3 a.m. Ryan called Ethan as soon as the transfer was confirmed. And in a crazy coincidence, she's being sent to your hospital. Since you're on shift, get ready to receive her. We sedated her for the pain, but she's out of danger. Ethan felt a mix of relief and intense anxiety. She was okay, but now she was coming here. He would have to face her again, look her in the eyes. Would she remember? Would she blame him? He spent the entire morning on edge, checking every incoming ambulance. When Chloe's mother arrived at the hospital, she was frantic. "Where is my daughter, Chloe?" She cried in the hallway, her face streaked with tears. She had flown in from London as soon as she got the call, catching the first available flight. She'd spent hours on the plane praying, begging God to let her daughter be okay. "Ma'am, please, you need to be calm," a nurse said gently, trying to soothe her. "She's in the ICU." The ICU? The mother didn't understand. She was in London, and all she knew was that her daughter had been in an accident. "You are the one responsible," she said, her eyes landing on Ethan, who was standing nearby. Her voice wasn't accusatory, just lost and desperate. "Doctor, we flew all the way from England to see our daughter and celebrate her birthday," Chloe's father said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. They had planned the trip for months. It was supposed to be a surprise. They were going to arrive 2 days before her birthday. "Ma'am, sir, it all happened so fast." Ethan needed to explain, needed them to understand. Chloe suddenly ran into the road. There was panic on her face. She was running from something. It wasn't my fault, but I gave her all the help I could. I am here to help in any way you need. I'll leave my contact information with you both. Please, call me for anything," Ethan said to Chloe's parents. He was visibly tense, the guilt still pressing down, but there was also genuine relief in knowing she was alive and stable. He handed them a card with his personal number, something he rarely did. To complete the scene, Chloe's paternal grandmother rushed into the hospital, anxiously calling for her granddaughter. She was an elegant woman with perfectly coiffed white hair, but her eyes were red from crying. "Chloe, my sweet girl, where is my granddaughter?" She asked everyone she passed. The whole family was gathering, united in their shared despair. What no one could have known was that a love story was about to begin inside a hospital. But life has a way of finding the most unexpected paths. However, while he was in the consultation room with Chloe's parents, Ethan had to deliver news that neither they nor Chloe knew. He had personally reviewed all her scans, and something in the CT images made him call 2 neurosurgeons for a second opinion. A subtle shadow, almost imperceptible to a less trained eye, but to him it was a silent, terrifying alarm. They all reached the same terrible conclusion. "Your daughter is stable now," Ethan began, choosing every syllable with care. He had to be gentle but direct. "But we need to talk about something we discovered in the scans." Chloe's mother's eyes widened, already sensing something was wrong. Her heart began to pound. "During the CT scan, we identified a tumor in Chloe's brain," he explained, watching her reaction closely. "It's a rare tumor located in a very sensitive area. Based on its location and characteristics, we believe it's a glioblastoma. It's extremely aggressive and in a region that makes any surgical intervention impossible without causing irreversible damage." The impact of the news hit her like a tidal wave. She brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. She felt her legs give way, and her husband caught her by the shoulders. "A tumor?" Her voice was a trembling, barely audible whisper. "No, my daughter's young. She's only 28. How is this possible?" "But is it serious?" Chloe's father asked, already knowing the answer from Ethan's expression. Ethan's own voice was heavy with sorrow. "Yes, it's very serious. I know this is a lot to process right now, but we will do everything possible to give her quality of life. We need more tests to confirm the stage and discuss treatment options. Radiation, chemotherapy, palliative care. It may take some time before she herself is ready to know." "How long?" the mother asked, her voice cracking. "How long does my daughter have?" Ethan took a deep breath. "It's difficult to say without more tests, but tumors of this type at this stage, they usually give a patient between 1 and 2 years. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Chloe's mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Her husband embraced her, his own tears streaming down his face. The grandmother, who had heard everything from the doorway, had to lean against the wall, murmuring prayers under her breath. It took Chloe's mother several minutes to compose herself. Her eyes met Ethan's again, now filled with a mixture of pain, anger, and a strange, quiet gratitude. "Thank you for telling us," she said finally. "Thank you for saving her on the road. Thank you for taking care of her." Ethan could only nod, unable to speak. The guilt from the accident was now intertwined with his medical responsibility and the pain of being the bearer of such devastating news. In that moment, he felt torn between the weight of what he had caused and the duty to care for the young woman who now carried an unexpected battle within her. A battle that he didn't yet know he would fight alongside her until the very end. He left that room with his shoulders slumped, walked into a nearby restroom, and locked himself in a stall. He cried again, but this time was different. It wasn't just guilt. It was a deep, profound sorrow for this young woman he barely knew, but who had already permanently marked his life. A few hours later, when Ethan finally gathered his courage, he went to visit Chloe in the ICU. She was lying in bed, a bit drowsy from the medication. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft light filtering through the blinds and the gentle blinking of the monitors beside her bed. She was staring at the ceiling, lost in thought, her fingers toying with the edge of the white sheet. When the door opened slowly, Ethan walked in. For the first time, their eyes truly met, without the panic, the blood, the urgency. There was a moment of absolute silence where time seemed to slow down. Chloe's brown eyes locked with his, and a shiver ran down Ethan's spine. They were beautiful, expressive eyes, with a spark of hope still shining through everything. He never believed in love at first sight. He was too skeptical, too rational for that. But something inside him shifted in that instant, as if a dormant part of his soul had just awakened. Chloe felt it too, an inexplicable connection, something that went beyond gratitude or circumstance. Her heart sped up, and she couldn't explain why. Taking a deep breath, Ethan approached the bed, trying to hide his nervousness. His palms were sweating. He opened his mouth to speak, but Chloe beat him to it with a tired smile and a soft voice. "Don't worry, doctor," she said, and there was a sweetness in her voice that touched Ethan deeply. "I'm going to be okay. Some thugs were chasing me, and it wasn't your fault. I should have stayed on the sidewalk, but I panicked and ran into the street." The sincerity in her voice made Ethan's eyes well up. The weight of the guilt he'd been carrying lessened slightly, but there was still something else he needed to say. But in that moment, he couldn't. He just held Chloe's hand for a brief instant, feeling its warmth, the life pulsing there. A single tear escaped and rolled down his cheek, and he quickly wiped it away, trying to maintain his professional composure. "How are you feeling?" he asked, shifting back into doctor mode. Chloe smiled faintly. "I'm alive. That's a good start." Those simple words echoed in Ethan's mind for the rest of the day. I'm alive. She had no idea how precious that life was, how fragile. And he would have to be the one to tell her. But not now. Not yet. A short while later, Ethan waited in the hall as Chloe's parents and grandmother arrived to visit. When they were all gathered around her bed, surrounding her with love and concern, Ethan took a deep breath and decided to be direct. There was no easy way to say this. "Chloe, we ran some tests after the accident," he began, his voice firm but gentle, "and we found something we need to discuss." Chloe frowned, trying to sit up straighter. "What, a fracture? Is something wrong with my recovery?" Her body was sore, but nothing seemed overly alarming. Ethan looked down for a second before meeting her eyes directly. He had to be looking at her when he said it. "No, it's not about the accident. The scans revealed a brain tumor. It's rare and located in a very difficult to reach area." He paused, swallowing hard. "Unfortunately, because of its location, it's considered inoperable." The room plunged into a deep, terrible silence. Chloe's eyes went wide, feeling the world around her crumble in slow motion. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, but didn't seem to make sense. "Tumor inoperable? What?" Her voice came out as a desperate whisper. "That can't be true. Please, tell me it's not true." Tears began to fall uncontrollably. Her mother, who already knew, brought her hands to her face again, sobbing. Her father held her hand, trying to calm her, but his own tears prevented him from speaking. Her grandmother prayed quietly in the corner, her hands trembling as she clutched her rosary beads. Chloe, her vision blurred by tears, stared at Ethan as if he could change this cruel reality, as if he could wave a magic wand and say it was all a mistake. "How long do I have?" she asked, her voice sharp, almost an accusation. Ethan swallowed hard before answering, each word weighing a ton. "Based on the type and location and considering similar cases, at most 2 years. But every case is unique, Chloe. We're going to do everything we can." 2 years. The phrase landed like a death sentence. Chloe was 28 with a whole life ahead of her, plans, dreams. And now a doctor was telling her she had 2 years max. She felt nauseous, dizzy, like she wanted to scream. But she just wept, held in her mother's arms as her father held them both. Ethan left that room carrying another impossible burden. In the empty corridor, he leaned against the wall and let his own tears fall. Why her? Why someone so young, so full of life? That night, back home, Ethan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He stared at the white ceiling, replaying every moment. He couldn't get Chloe's face out of his mind. Her brown eyes, her weak but genuine smile, the strength she showed even after receiving the worst possible news. He didn't understand why this was affecting him so deeply, but he felt something he had never felt before. A connection, a need to protect her, to be near her. Something that went far beyond medical responsibility. He spent the following weeks obsessively researching Chloe's case. He reviewed every medical article on her type of tumor, looked for experimental treatments, and consulted with colleagues in other countries. He had to do something. He couldn't just accept that she was going to die. A month later, Chloe's birthday arrived. She had been discharged 2 weeks prior and had started chemotherapy, but she maintained a surprisingly positive spirit. Ethan had spoken with her several times during her chemo sessions, and a genuine friendship had formed. She told him about her life, her dreams of seeing the world, of writing a book. He listened, fascinated by this extraordinary woman. She hardly looked like she had been in an accident. She was radiant, with no visible long-term injuries. Her hair had grown over the spot they had to shave to treat the wound, and she wore a beautiful headband to cover it. Despite the beauty of the celebration, there was a bittersweet feeling in the air, the contrast between the joy of the moment and the fragility of Chloe's life. Still, everyone who loved her was determined to make the day a landmark of happiness. The party was in her grandmother's backyard, a place Chloe had loved since she was a child. It was a lush garden with flowers of every color, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a large oak tree that offered generous shade. Colorful balloons and delicate string lights were hung from the branches, creating a magical, welcoming atmosphere. A long table was set with a cake, sweets, and all of Chloe's favorite foods. Family and a few close friends gathered, their laughter filling the air. Ethan arrived feeling a bit out of place. He was the doctor, the bearer of bad news, the man who had hit her with his car. He carried a simple gift, a book of poems by Robert Frost, an author she had mentioned she loved. When his eyes met Chloe's, however, all his discomfort vanished. She broke into a smile so genuine and luminous it warmed his chest. She looked beautiful in a light floral dress that danced in the afternoon breeze. The vibrant blue headband in her hair made her eyes shine even brighter. "You came," she said, her voice full of contagious joy. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," he replied, handing her the gift. Their fingers brushed for a moment, and an electric current seemed to pass between them. During the party, Ethan watched Chloe from a distance. He saw how she interacted with everyone, the strength that radiated from her, the way she found joy in the smallest details, even while carrying such a heavy sentence. She laughed, hugged her parents, and told stories to her grandmother. No one just looking at her would know she was sick. She was living in that moment with an intensity Ethan had never witnessed before. Later, as most of the guests were getting cake, Chloe approached Ethan, who was standing a little apart near the old oak tree. "Thank you for the book," she said, holding it to her chest. "He's my favorite." "I know," he smiled. "You mentioned it in our last conversation?" They stood in silence for a moment, just watching the other's happiness. The sound of laughter and soft music created a soundtrack for their meeting. "You know, doctor," she began, her voice quieter, "sometimes I forget. For a few hours I forget that I'm sick. I just live, and today is one of those days." "That's the goal, Chloe," he said, turning to face her. "To live every day. It's all any of us can do." "But it's not the same," she interrupted, her eyes welling up. You know it's not. Every laugh, every hug, it feels like a goodbye. Ethan's heart ached. He wanted to say so much. He wanted to tell her he was falling in love with her, that her strength inspired him, that he spent his nights poring over research for a cure no matter how impossible it seemed. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he did something his professional side would never permit. He gently held her face in his hands and wiped away a tear with his thumb. "I'm not going to let you say goodbye," he whispered, his voice thick with a promise. "We're going to fight this, together." In that instant, under the shade of the oak tree, with the sounds of the party in the background, Chloe no longer saw Ethan as the doctor or the man from the accident, but as a partner. Someone who, for some inexplicable reason, fate had placed in her path at the hardest moment of her life. She leaned in and, on impulse, kissed him. It was a soft, hesitant kiss at first, but it quickly deepened, filled with all the urgency, fear, and hope they both felt. When they pulled apart, breathless, they looked into each other's eyes. No words were needed. There, in that garden, in the middle of a celebration of life, an unlikely and powerful love was blooming, determined to defy time and fight the impossible. The journey would be painful and uncertain, but now they would no longer face it alone. Original outro provided by the user, perfectly suited for YouTube. Hey story lovers! What a roller coaster of emotions on Ethan and Chloe's journey, right? Their story starts with the screech of brakes, an accident that seemed like the end, but by a twist of fate became the beginning of everything. We saw a dedicated doctor, Ethan, ripped from his exhausting routine and thrown into a nightmare of guilt. And in the midst of that chaos, we saw Chloe, a woman who, upon facing her own mortality, discovered a strength and a reason to live more intensely than ever before. This is a journey that teaches us how life can change in a single second, about the weight of responsibility, and above all, about a love born in the most unlikely way in the most unexpected of places, a hospital corridor. A love that doesn't come to heal the body, but to save the soul. Now it's your turn. What was the moment that gave you chills? Was it Ethan's despair after the accident, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders? Chloe's incredible strength when she received the most devastating news of her life? Or that kiss in the garden, a silent promise of love against time? Let me know down in the comments. If this story about fate, resilience, and a love that defies the impossible touched you, please share it. Let's spread the message that true love isn't afraid of time and that every second is a chance to live to the fullest. And of course, don't forget to suggest themes for our next video. A huge hug, and until next time, where we'll prove once again that the most powerful love is the one that blossoms in adversity and gives us the courage to love, even when the clock insists on ticking against us.